Greetings, Barcadians, and welcome to the virtual towers of binary Arcadia, where the games go on long into the night. You're joining Rich and I today for a new video, a new series, perhaps, if this works out well, that we're calling the BA Debate. So essentially, it's Rich and I debating on subjects within the games industry of our choosing, anything topical, anything interesting. Today's debate is all about games that resemble movies. So the specific question is, are games that are like interactive movies progress for the industry? So yeah, Rich and I have cue cards at the ready. I've got my Ghost of Tsushima war banner in the background there, just to set the tone. We are at war. And Rich, yeah, why don't you just give us a shout as to what you're up to? I don't even know where you're filming, actually. I can't see you.
So I'm in the filming room, surrounded by my wares. No ghosts stuff currently up, so yeah. I don't have my wall banner, so I'm expecting defeat.
Well, we'll see about that one. The reason we chose this as our opening foray into debating was, well, why don't you explain, Rich? We had a bit of a, I would say, hot-tempered debate as young, 15, 16-year-olds along these lines. But tell us in more detail, what were we going on about?
Yeah, so I can't remember what we were playing, something on the PS2, and we were saying how good the graphics looked, and I think I said something like, do you think we'll ever get to the point where we've got like photorealistic graphics and, you know, games are basically like choice based and you're interacting by making decisions and then that plays another video? And then you came back with...
I mean, again, I'm not too sure. I mean, there's been plenty of night's sleep since that argument. I think my point was, you know, I don't think games will ever become just a series of quick time events. You know, like similar to what we've seen recently in Black Mirror's Bandersnatch, you know, where it just becomes this kind of almost like a text adventure, but strung together in a series of clips. However, I know that you think I might have been saying that games will never achieve photorealistic graphics, which may have been true because, you know, what were we there? 64 Dreamcast era, perhaps?
Yeah.
And obviously a way away from the likes of what we're seeing these days, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us, those sorts of level standards of graphics. So maybe I was, you know, I certainly know at that young age, I saw things in much more of a black and white way than I do now. So maybe that was part of the issue as well.
And this basically became quite a heated, like, disagreement.
It did.
And yeah, there was a fallout.
Yeah, we certainly didn't hold back, did we? No. I don't think.
But anyway.
So we thought, now we're older, wiser, greyer, wrinklier, we thought we'd take this opportunity to kind of perhaps hark back to that, settle a score in some ways, and hopefully provide some entertaining viewing for all you Barcadians out there. So, Rich, are games that are like interactive movies progress for the industry? So first of all, I suppose for me, I need to expand the resolution of this argument a little bit, just to drill down on what exactly we mean by, you know, interactive movies. So first of all, I suppose what this argument is really looking at is open world games versus linear experiences. So, you know, ultimately we're saying, are games that have become predominantly linear experiences progress for the industry? And you know what my argument is? Well, I think not. I think open world games, at least for me, capture in large part, you know, the magic in video games, the magic of video games, the true essence of what makes video games as a medium authentic, unique, and incomparable to everything else. So for me, I suppose, just to throw back to more of a personal experience, Zelda Ocarina of Time. When I first played that game, which I think you would argue is one of the earliest forms of an open world game, certainly when you compare them to modern games, it pales in comparison. The size of the world is very small indeed. But at the time, that was my first kind of experience of this persistent world that you could play around in, and kind of choose to do the story at your own time, in your own way. And obviously there are restrictions in Ocarina, but broadly speaking, Ocarina was mind-blowing for me. Just that whole sense of losing yourself in this huge imaginative fantasy world was just, it was amazing. And for me, that is where the true essence of video games lies. And just to kind of mic drop you, Rich, before I let you come in and respond, Breath of the Wild, one of the channel, I know we both love it, one of our favourite games of all time. I think that, again, is the essence of that. It's pure fun. It's this huge sandbox experience. And also, hugely commercial and popular game, GTA. That's the same thing. That's what that's all about, having this big kind of city, wilderness at your fingertips, just to have loads of fun in. And, the numbers don't lie. Both games that have sold extremely well, and I think for good reason. So what say you to that, sir?
So while I take your argument about both of those games, me and you both absolutely love narrative games. We love story-based games, and straight away I would come back with that, saying Breath of the Wild has basically no story. And the story is lost because of the fact that it's so concentrated on being an open world game. And actually, I would say, I don't think there's really been, you could probably count on your hand how many great open world story games there have been where the story has followed through well. There just aren't many games out there. Whereas when you look at the power of linear games, the likes of The Last of Us, things like maybe Uncharted, like the original Metal Gear Solids, they were very linear in the fact that you were pushed through areas, and that meant the story could be told exactly how they wanted to. Heavy Rain and Detroit, exactly the same. The story of those far outweighs any of the stories that are being told in open world games, and that is, it's hard to argue with that, really.
Yeah, but mate, the best thing for me about video games is, that whole losing yourself in this world. It's that whole role-playing experience that we step into the shoes of some in-game avatar, and we have this hugely dynamic experience full of emergent opportunities at our fingertips. We create our own adventure. So it's not something that's sculpted, that we're kind of forced into. It's very much we are the masters of our universe. And that, for me, again, is that really unique selling point of video games that you just can't find anywhere else. So for me, it'd be to lose video games and their identity if games become too much like movies and these linear experiences that you mentioned there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a good bit of script writing, and it's nice to have a decent story threaded in there if it's possible. But I'm saying ultimately, it's that fun which I'm going for. And you mentioned there Breath of the Wild. Yes, there's a non-existent story, but doesn't it speak volumes that it's as highly rated as it is, even with that non-existent story? And then Red Dead Redemption 2, a game which we do have different opinions on, but whilst I will say the story was good, I enjoyed it. It was gripping and it was dramatic, and it elicited quite the emotional response. For me, the best part of that game was the whole Wild West fantasy, that kind of authentic Wild West world at your fingertips with all these different things to do and see. It was a little overwhelming at times, but certainly, as I got totally caught up with my pursuit as a hunter, skinning all of those pesky animals out there, and it was just yeah, that was where the fun and the joy lay for me mostly, not in the story experience. And I suppose a good analogy would be, whereas linear games are much more like roller coasters, where the track is fixed, it's very much a crafted experience from front to back. You know, open world games are much more like fun houses. So you've got this kind of very broad space filled with all these fun activities just to go nuts in. And I suppose for me, what I'm arguing is, again, that's what makes good games great. You know, that sense of dynamics and emergent opportunity. So, what are you saying to that? Come at me.
So it seems like you're saying basically you can't have as much fun in a linear-based interactive movie style game. Well, you've only got to look at like the Uncharted series. Such a lot of fun to play, and that was a linear experience. Granted, in the later Uncharted there are some open world elements, but in essence they're open world areas where they're going to lead you to the place you need to go to. They're not like go and experience whatever you want in this area. But I feel like what you're really saying there is that your investment in a game comes from your connection to the world and how you can interact with the world rather than your connection to a character. Which is basically what you're getting in a linear story-based game. You're getting a connection to a specific character and they're run through the game, whereas you're sort of, which is very much what you get when you're watching a film or a TV series. You're invested in a character, whereas I do get what you're saying in that respect, that that is the trade-off you get when you're playing video games. You're able to invest in a world rather than a specific character. But there are games that offer both things. You know, God of War, amazing game. I've recently played that. That's got both elements, but ultimately the story is the key in that game, and that's probably one of the best examples that I can think of off the top of my head that actually has a very good story to open world basis. And I don't think you can get a really good story within an open world. And you know me, don't get me started on graphics tabs.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Well, before I come to that, no, fair play, God of War. I've got to hold my hands up on that one. Fantastic game, and yeah, like you say, I think it did a good job of giving you a certain amount of freedom whilst having a very compelling story. You know, that whole one-shot experience was very unique. There's no doubt about it, and yeah, that has to rank up there as one of the best games of all time, really. But, I'm trying to sing the praises here, Rich, of player agency, of freedom in video games. That's where I'm saying the magic happens. I mean, yeah, it's all right. It's great to have a lovely crafted story and narrative. And don't get me wrong, God of War did that beautifully in that universe. But, I'll name a game, Witcher 3. Played that recently. Fantastic game. And in Temeria, player agency was king. They absolutely, shouted that from the rooftops in that game. So, that it was weaved in throughout. You had little side quests that were seemingly insignificant, but even choices within those side quests would have ripple effects throughout the rest of the game. There was multiple endings. There was just a great deal of player agency and choice in that game that I think was beautifully woven in this, huge open world experience. So both a really gripping story with a lot of room for the player to grow into and really, as I've said before, create their own adventure. But, that it still had these fantastic open world elements along with it. And if you want to talk about graphics, I mean, come on, mate. Well, I've just said there, The Witcher 3, massive open world game. 2015, I think it came out. And at the time, the graphics were cutting edge across the industry. Even for an open world game, it didn't spare any punches there. And you can also look at, we've talked about it already, Red Dead Redemption 2. That is still, I think, up there with, one of the best looking games of all time in terms of its sheer realism, and the power of its fidelity. So yeah, I mean, come on, mate, you don't have to compromise. There's two brilliant examples of open world games that have amazing graphics too. So yeah,
mate,
what you got to come back with?
You've got to say, now don't get me wrong, I'm sure The Witcher is amazing. I've not played it, but you speak very highly, and lots of other people. But you have to admit that open world games suffer technically. There's those glitches, there's clipping. Obviously the world can't be as amazingly borne out because of the limitations of the fact that they're having to render an entire world at a time rather than a specific area where you're moving through in these more linear side games. So go on.
I suppose. Yeah,
okay.
Maybe.
And maybe you might say that that's part of the charm of them, but why should there be a compromise there? You don't have to compromise when you're looking at linear, more interactive movie style games. And I do, and obviously because of the fact that they're very focused on what's going on, they have optimized game engines. So the game engine is literally optimized for what is on screen. We've seen it in The Last of Us 2. It looks absolutely amazing, and that is simply because it's limited by how much is going on at one time. And that obviously creates, improved tech like that, which can trickle down and ultimately improve, products moving forward. So I think we need these linear-based products to move games forward, even if maybe ultimately down the road we see them move to a different thing. Maybe they move to be unpopular now with open world games being so popular. But I think we come back to something, and I know this is something that's very close to your heart, but many of the more linear games, not all, are what we call games as art, which I know is very close to your heart, where the product is so closely the vision of the creator that you're literally seeing their artistic flair throughout the game, whereas open world games are more of a blank canvas, and you're painting your own picture of the creator's game by the way you run through that game, the way you interact with the world. And I do think that you get a better impression of the artist's vision of that on the linear games, and I know that's something you really like. I mean, don't get me wrong, you do get player agency in linear games, such as BioShock, where you get to, whether you kill people or not kill them, whether you get to choose the way you play through those games. The same with The Last of Us 2, you get to choose whether you kill things, how you interact with these areas that you're in. So there can be player agency in these more linear games, but I just want to double down on the games as art, because that's my straw in the cap to take you out.
Oh, you brought out the big guns.
I did.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I've got to make some concessions there. Then you don't need to labour that point with me. Games as art, I'm a massive proponent of them. I think, I want to see more examples of games as art in the industry. We've talked at length before about Death Stranding, The Last of Us, even back in the day, Shadow of the Colossus, games like that, and what sort of emotional experiences they became because by virtue of the fact, as you say, they had this artistic statement. So yeah, okay, I mean, you've perhaps got me there. I think what I'm trying to get at is that, and at the core of this kind of concern for me, is fear, ultimately. And my fear is that games are, could lean into these linear experiences too much, and therefore we could end up losing our identity as a medium, as an industry. For what for me brings so much to video games, as we talked about it: freedom, player agency, choice. They, for me, create a lot of, skill ceilings in video games. They have a lot of creative outlet for us as we play these games. I think if we lose that and things become too honed, too narrow, don't get me wrong, I love kind of these author-crafted experiences as much as anybody else when they're done well. but I don't want to be playing games which are just a series of, like we said at the start, QTEs played out in flowchart fashion. For me, that's not necessarily my ideal vision of the games industry. But, you know, fair enough. I think perhaps what we're saying then is, you know, this town is big enough for the both of us. You know, you can have open world experiences, you can have linear experiences, and, you know, there's a broad spectrum in between. There's a big rainbow of, well, as you said earlier, God of War. That is probably one of the best examples of a game that's merged those two concepts in a way which I think is very successful. So yeah, what we're saying then is that they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I suppose, you know, we might one day live in a future where there's some sort of open world, perpetual, sustainable universe, some sort of like massively multiplayer online RPG, where linear stories could be added to that piecemeal, you know, in the form of almost like DLC drops. And who knows, in the long distant future, just like Dreams, the video game, maybe even user content could be added, and we can craft our own linear experiences to gift to each other, which is interesting. That would be a future I could get on board with. I think the best of both worlds. I mean, what are we saying then, Rich? Are we close to an accord on this one?
Yeah, so I think what we're saying is it's horses for courses, isn't it, really? So yeah. What we want to see is the perfect marriage of open world and linear games brought together perfectly, or as close to perfection as we can, so that we can have that games as art, but also experience it how we want to experience it.
This is it, you know, they can coexist. There's room for both. And I suppose, yeah, we get to enjoy that kind of experimentation, don't we, as we see these games merged before us in different ways. Absolutely. So yeah, I suppose we'll have to declare this first debate then, Rich, null and void. It seems we've bricked ourselves into the same corner on this one in the end.
It does seem so.
So, I think that's about it from me then, Rich. I've got nothing else to say. BArcadians, I hope you enjoy that little debate and this new kind of series of video styles that Rich and I are trying. Let us know what you think about open world video games versus linear experiences, what you think of games becoming more like movies, and whether that is progress for the industry. And let us know if you'd like to see Rich and I take on any other debates about interesting topics, subjects, arguments in the games industry, because yeah, it feels like it's going to be a good laugh getting our teeth into those subjects and each other in the process, Rich.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's everything from me today. Don't forget to like the video to support everything we do. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notifications. And I think that's probably about it, Rich. Another one for the archives.
Stamped and completed.